just so that if for some reason anyone that's attending wants to rewatch any parts, or if you happen to get kicked out, we're gonna post the recording of this. If you want to share this with someone that you think would be helpful for, obviously we'll put it public on YouTube so you can share with everyone. Um, if you're in attendance, we took questions as people registered for this event. That being said, if something comes up that you want clarification for, just type in the comment chat box for me, the little message thread. Um, you can like raise your hand and unmute as well if you would like to do that, but little bit easier if you just pop it down in the chat and I can fit it into the flow of our conversation. So, Emma, why don't you give your little Grooms program spiel and we'll jump into bios and the conversation today.
Hi guys, welcome to our second in the series of health and horses and brain and all the rest of the fun stuff. I'm part of the USEA Grooms Committee, and part of our thing is to try and help provide information, help grooms within the industry, not just eventing, but also basically any discipline. If you want help, whether it's dressage, vaulting, you name it, we're happy to give answers when we can. And for those of you who don't know me, I was Philip Dutton's head girl for 16 years. So I've been around the circuit a little bit, and I have not been on the circuit for 4 years. I've actually progressed into doing my own bodywork business with for equine bodywork now. So one of the exciting things I find about grooming is it's a major career, but we also educate ourselves that it's very easy to step into other equine related industries. So anyway, I hope everyone enjoys tonight. Ask your questions, as Tyler says, and I'm going to pass you over to Margot to introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Margot Thomas. I'm showgroom for Laura Kraut, and I've worked for Laura for 6 years. But I actually got my start in eventing. I did some showing in eventing and was a groom for a couple of years, and then moved over to show jumping 10, 11 years ago. So I spend half the year in the Netherlands, basing in Holland, traveling to shows there, and then I spend the rest of the year here in America. I'm currently in Upperville, Virginia, and then I'll head down to either out to California or to Florida. My schedule is unpredictable at times, but yeah. So and I don't know. I've really enjoyed making grooming into a career, and I appreciate doing outreach to help other grooms. I really think it's important to build community as grooms and help each other out. So, Tyler.
Yes, I am Dr. Tyler Murray. Spent a variety of years doing a variety of different things in the horse industry. So, kind of a typical started as a working student, pretty much managed a barn as a working student, got one of those barn manager gigs. I was a vet tech for Dr. Kevin Keene, who treats a lot of the eventing horses in Area 2. And it was Emma that hooked me up with my grooming job for Jenny Brannigan. So I got to go all over with Jenny and just see the highest levels of the sport, but always had an interest in psychology and sports psychology along the way. I got my master's degree while I was vet teching and ultimately got my doctorate. I was actually probably getting my doctorate while I met Margot at the horse hotel.
Yeah.
And when she was stuck, like the paperwork or something was messed up for your horses. So Margot was stuck at the horse hotel and we were coming through. And so I spent a day with Margot a couple years ago in
In
Belgium,
the
I
Netherlands. Yeah.
think.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, my passion is for helping people find passion and love in the horses, regardless of it be in the saddle, as a groom, as a hobbyist. I am a total hobbyist now. I'm getting to lease one of the old five-star horses that I groomed for, so that's been really cool. And I work mostly with equestrian athletes through my sport and performance psychology practice. So I am not a clinical psychologist, but there's a lot of conversations that go into burnout and mental health and just taking care of yourself that do fit under the umbrella of sport and performance psychology. So that's kind of my gig and why I'm here to encompass the mental health aspect. And we got some really, really great questions for this session specifically. We wanted to highlight some of the pressures of dealing with the groom and rider relationship. A couple questions just related to grooming in general. But why don't we start with talking about healthy ways to set boundaries with the rider? I know that this person asked the question of like having everything feel less personal. And when you are working as many hours as you do as a groom and you are spending so much time with these horses, you do kind of take everything personally. And boundaries, it's a great word, but they're hard to set in this industry. So I'd love to start with the groom perspective, either from Emma or Margot, and then I can jump in and give some mental health tips for boundaries in general.
Margot,
Um,
I'm going to let you go.
I think for me, I think what's become one of my pet peeves in the industry is riders that start to create this perspective or this image of we're all family, because I think that really blurs the line of employer and employee. And I think like because when it comes to family, like you do things out of love. You go the extra mile because they're family and because you care about them, and like that is part of the job, but like there needs to be a boundary. Like you have to have work hours, you know, you have to like there is above and beyond, and like I enjoy doing that for my horses, but like it's where they start to blend this of like, you know, but we're like family here, so you know, I need you to do this, and it's like, well, we're not family. Like this is, you pay me to be here, and it there should be, and it's not, I can't say that it's easy to say that to a boss. um but I, you know, and I think that comes back down to communication, that you have to like communicate with your rider of what expectations are, you know, especially when you start a job, and yeah, they change. You know, and your job description changes over the years if you stay somewhere a long time. But yeah, I just think it's important to communicate what you're comfortable with doing and what you're not, and like how to, you know, it's hard to say because you do care about the animals and you want to you take pride in your work, but I think it's just important to keep you know, try and keep a really clear like, you know, this is a job, you know, and like remember that there are a lot of jobs that you wouldn't be expected to work until such and such hour, or you know, you know, and as grooms we do work long hours, but it's just trying to keep that in perspective, um even if it keeps you more mentally stable of like like I don't really want to do this, you know, I'm going to do this, but maybe I'll figure out a way to have a discussion later, you know, that this is really, you know, asking me to meet the vet at 10 o'clock at night, not really in the job description, you know, like, so, you know, there's different, and you know, I've had different jobs over the years in different relationships, and I'm, you know, happy to say I'm in a really good place now. But yeah, I think it's just trying to remember, you know, the employer employee line, for me. So Emma, what do you have to add?
I think everything you said is amazing. Um, I think, especially for people coming into the industry, I think what I've learned most, I'm going to say, coming up through the years, is knowing your role. And I think that's an extremely important aspect of when you go to interview, or maybe you go on a trial period, of you actually figuring out what your role is and sitting down with your employer or the barn manager, whoever is the right person to go to, and be like, what is expected of me? What is my role? What am I in charge of? And like you say, that has to be flexible within a certain extent. They're horses, they're animals. It
Yeah.
is what it is. But at least have some kind of, you know, if you go in and they're like, you're not expected to go to shows, then, you know, they can't
Yeah.
get mad at you if tomorrow they're telling you to go show and you have no idea where everything is, what's packed, da, 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 da.
Yeah.
You know, so I think it's very important to have that conversation, to have that boundary set when you get there. And then if you feel like those, you know, maybe they're extending your role, but you haven't had the discussion, and you start to feel it get a little bit uncomfortable, as in maybe you don't quite know where your role is, or you don't quite know how to take on more work. Being able to take that conversation and before it starts to get emotionally charged. And I can definitely say I learned that one the hard way.
Yeah.
Definitely, and I would say at Philips, I had a good thing, it was all going great. And then there was a few staff changes and I had to step up what I was doing. And it didn't take me too much before I wasn't getting burnt out, but I definitely felt the tension. And a lot of that was me putting myself in that position of wanting to take on everything and do everything right. But I should have gone sooner to Philip and Evie and said, hey, I don't know how I'm doing this, or can you help me? And as soon as I did that, they helped me. But it was me not doing it soon enough that caused for me to get anxious and in doing my job. So I really think, basically figure out what your role is, ask what your role is. If it's starting to change, double check with them. Are you happy with it? Are they happy with you stepping up further? And just really think about communication before something gets real high stress.
Yeah.
And, I think a lot of what we'll talk about tonight is not letting too many emotions get involved.
Yeah.
And I think those are the sort of things I feel about setting boundaries anyway.
Yeah, I think the only other thing I want to add, and I think that's why this whole idea of them calling it family has been on my mind, is I was talking with another girl that's a groom, and she basically went back to a job that she, had moved. It was like from someone she's known since she was younger, and she went back there, and she was like said that she shouted at her, and she like in her head was like, she's only doing this because she knows I can take it, and that, but like she really shouldn't be treating me this way. And like, she talked to me later and like I could hear the mental conversation in her head, but that's where I was like, no, that's not how, like, just because you've known her a long time and she knows that you can take it is not a reason to make you feel like a piece of crap about something that wasn't your fault, because she needs to get her emotions out on you. That's not fair. And so it's like, so there is, a time, and she was able to, I guess, in her way, show a little bit of distance or not attitude, like not being snarky, but just being curt, and like so that the friend, because they have known each other a long time, got the idea of like, oh, she's not happy. And I think that did lead to a conversation. But like, I think that is where you can, if something like that happens, you can open yourself up to like later when tensions have cooled down. We need to have a conversation about how we communicate and our behavior towards one another, even though I want to say our behavior with, because, I need, to feel, comfortable here. And I didn't feel very comfortable when you were shouting at me. So it's hard conversations to have, but like sometimes you need to figure out the right timing, the right place, even if it's after the fact, rather than everyone getting exploding, sometimes walk away and then find your moment later to have that conversation. So,
Yeah, and I think the really good thing to point out in that is a boundary is a two-way street, and it should be honestly something that's set outside of a stressful moment that requires nothing to be upheld, right? There shouldn't be effort to uphold boundaries if the boundaries in place are set up and organized correctly. Now, that does open the conversation of this is an industry without work contracts most of the time, without an HR department. Like we don't have systems in place to go through and do these things quote unquote properly. But I think that's a good barometer of if you're in a healthy working relationship. Did you set boundaries at the beginning of the job that are still being upheld? And if a boundary is being changed, if you're being asked to do something outside of the scope of your job, is there a conversation about it? I think we've done a good job of answering this question as well, but just specifically wanted to phrase, because we had someone ask, what are some ways to communicate effectively with riders, owners, or trainers when expectations aren't clear? So obviously, like having the conversation's important, but do you guys have any input on how to have those conversations or how to communicate them when it's uncomfortable? Obviously, we kind of talked about like not doing it while emotions are high, but what are anything else to add to that?
For me, I was thinking about this question, and again, one of the themes I think we need to reiterate through this whole evening is going to be respect, right? And making sure that you are being respected, but you have to be respectful to everyone else. So, again, Margot, going back to the like, we need to have this conversation. It should never be, well, I think or I will, anything like that. Like, you need to open up the conversation with, how, we're all in this together. We're all wanting the same thing for the horse, stuff like that. And then if an owner or a trainer or a rider is saying something and maybe you don't quite understand what they say something, like reiterate and ask them a question, ask them an open-ended question, like, okay, can you just, have I got this right? This is what I'm understanding. And that, basic conversation respect. I just got
Yeah.
the word respect. And then, but the other thing too is like, for me, I'm thinking more sort of along the lines in the barn, like, or at a show, when we had multiple horses, like Philip might change the bridle, change the bit, or want a different saddle, or, this type of boot or that type of boots. And it was important for me to have it written down somewhere. And if there was a lot of things going on, I'd actually ask him to text me. Can you text me what bit, what bridle, what boots do you want on? Whatever the topic was, like, and that way, then we've got accountability, right? If I messed up, I can go back to the text and be like, hey, like, this is what you said, so this is what I did, or other way around. So I think finding ways that will ensure everyone is understanding, I think is critical. And Margot, I was like, I think do you feel you have a different, like with the owners of that? Are you involved a lot of the owners in your?
Some of them, yeah.
Yeah.
Like I'm currently at our owner's farm. So, but I don't, work for them necessarily. I work for Laura. So there can be a very fine line there of what I'm supposed to say. Um, it's, it's not like we, are doing things their horses they're not aware of or anything. It's not that kind of thing. But you treat them like they're the people that pay the bills. You treat them with the utmost respect and always have a smile on your face. And like, and so it's, you just always try and and if I never want to be like her to call Laura and say, well, Margot said, I don't want, something like that to go. So I always just, I'm very polite, very, say the simplest terms of things and not go too in depth. At least when I'm communicating with owners, because I don't know what Laura said. I don't know what the vets have said. And so it's kind of knowing your place as far as communicating with owners. And yeah, at least with the rider or with the manager, like, I work with many non-confrontational people. So like I always finding the right time for like when you're talking about tack changes and things, follow-up questions or clarifications. Um, and is always important. I'm never afraid to text Laura of like, oh hey, did you mean this? Or when we're in the moment, when she says something about a certain bit or noseband, following up so that, I don't forget. And so sorry, I don't have many notes, so I forgot where I was going to follow up with that. But yeah, but I think also just finding the safe space, when going back to what we were talking about, arguments and things of finding the place when everybody's cooled down to communicate effectively. And it can be hard to do it with a mediator, someone else in the room. So sometimes you just have to put your big girl pants on and go and start the conversation. I know I've had to do that with a few coworkers over the years of, we've had something uncomfortable happen, a disagreement about a bridle or whatever, and especially when you're tired and tensions are high. And then, that's not always the moment to finish the conversation. So sometimes after a good night's sleep, try and like, get your thoughts clear and have that conversation later, whether that's with a rider or a coworker, about a disagreement.
Yeah. No, and I think just to add, like in terms of sometimes expectations not being clear for a specific example with an owner, it was one of my first jobs in the industry, and the rider that I worked for only had like a small string of her own. So a lot of her clients would pay us to do extra work for them, right? Tack up for their lessons after barn hours. So it was after barn hours, and I was getting paid directly by the owner. And that was fantastic, right? It was such a great thing for me to be able to do. But
Mhm.
there became a point where I remember like I would be mid shower and my phone would ring and I would like jump to go answer my phone
Mm.
thinking it might be the owner like needing something. So that was a situation where the boundary was not set. It was, hey, we'll pay you for extra work. And I had to eventually say, I'm happy to do this for you. And it's
Yeah.
one thing to text me if you're running 30 minutes behind, but it's another one for me to like always be on call and that like stress
Yeah.
and anxiety and that like again a situation where expectations really weren't clear and I just had to say this is not healthy for me. Can we do this in a different way that's still beneficial? And I'm not writing you off. I'm still wanting to do this. I'm still very grateful to do this job, but I don't want to feel like I'm just owned by you and my moment and my time is owned by you. Like I want to know that if I put my food in the microwave, I can eat it and not like be called back into the barn.
Yeah, well, that's definitely there are hours that you should be communicating with people, but and especially with me because we work on two different time zones, America and Europe. There's definitely moments where somebody's messaging me at 10 o'clock at night in Europe, and I'm about to go to bed, and I'm like, I'm not answering that right now. Like I'm just, it's not life or death. It's not happening right now. Because my job does have a management piece, when you get to this level, and things, and it's so there's you kind of learn to put in order of importance what I need to answer right now and what I can deal with later, and you do need to set that boundary for yourself as well. Or I'll remind other people of like, great, can we discuss this tomorrow because I'm going to bed. So yeah, there's definitely figuring out the right ways to set your boundaries, and you learn that with time and age as well, for sure.
And then I just want to add, I think, not sure if I'm going to say this the right way, so here we go.
Oh,
But I think it's important to know it sort of tags on to what you can and can't say to owners. It's as a groom for me, it was in I know I could be like if an owner came up to me and asked me a question, it was very clear that I would like be no, that's not a question for me. You need to go and ask Philip. And you might have that slightly pushy owner that, thinks you should have all the
yeah.
answers, and maybe you do, but don't I think it's important as a groom, you're not the one there to manage the owners per se. So if any question comes up that you're not comfortable with, then
Mhm.
I think you need to send them to the rider or the trainer, whatever the situation is.
Yeah. There also can be lines sometimes where clients or owners will try and be your friend, and they want to, and that's also a line that's hard to differentiate, especially if you're similar in age with a client. But at the end of the day, it is also your job. And so you have to figure out, your loyalty to some extent needs to stay with your rider, as far as you can't go out drinking all night with somebody that's a client or an owner and then spill things they're not supposed to know, or things about your horses that aren't their horses and things like that. So there's definitely boundaries that you end up towing the line, because we're all horse people and we all go to the same shows and you spend a lot of time together. But yeah, there's definitely, you need to keep boundaries from that as well, because that can be a dangerous line to tow.
Yeah. I'm going to circle back a little bit to talking about you both kind of said like communicating about tack and making sure like you've got the right boots and the right bridle. What are some strategies that you've used to help stay calm in a moment where maybe one of those things goes wrong, right? Like they told you that you were supposed to have a certain bridle and you had a different one. Maybe you're running late or there is just like everything went right and there's a simple tack malfunction or something like that. Like what's your centering in the moment of like, oh, we're trying to get in the ring and this is not right? Because
Yeah.
I panic, honestly. That's my answer. Panic. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah. No, I think planning ahead. So, like in my ring bag, I always have like some electric tape, like and a hole punch, things like that to make sure if something, oh my God, this martingale needs to be tighter. Ooh, there's not enough holes, like, or tape because, or rubber bands or whatever, because the keepers aren't, something falls off, whatever. Or making sure I have a spare running martingale back in the barn and learning how to run fast to go get things if they break. And like I had a moment, at Spruce Meadows in Calgary a few weeks ago where I have a horse that it can get quite nervous at the ring. And Laura was about to go in and she was like, we're missing, she was like, she's slipping all over the place. And I was like, you don't have a stud in your right front shoe, but like, I have a really hard time touching this horse once you're on her. Like she ended up, we had an accident. She just got a lot of ring anxiety, amazing horse, but like, we've had to figure out how to deal with this. And like, so, I had to go run down the hill, grab an extra stud, and then had to figure out how to get to this horse to get the stud in while she's shaking, I'm shaking. Like, but we got it done and she went in the ring and it was fine. But like, you just kind of have to figure out how to plan ahead in case things do go wrong, what you can do to avoid, and then, I always have like, especially when I'm going to the ring, like I have my mental checklist of, like when I tag up a horse, like it's obviously already wearing the bridle, it's wearing the saddle, the girth. It's like I double check and make sure I have a number on, and I make sure I have whatever hind boots I need to have, and whatever studs, like I double check those things are in the bag. And then that's kind of my like, okay, everything else should be right from here, and so it's, and that's once you've tacked up horses thousands of times to go to the ring, you kind of get your, I don't stress about it anymore. Like even when I'm going, you're at the Olympics, I've tacked this horse up 10,000 times. I'm not changing anything now. I'm not putting extra tape on, just like it's the same thing we've done, 2 weeks ago at a different show. So like it's just kind of trusting that your system works, and not letting yourself get too worked up about the little things or what could possibly go wrong. It's just kind of like take a deep breath and like, all right, let's go. Let's go to the ring. So
Yeah, I was going to add, you said it at the end there, like taking a deep breath, I think is so
yeah.
key. And sort of putting that together with in the back of your head, knowing that if you're stressed out of the situation, that feeds off onto the horse. So you really do have to know how to put up that barrier of just, I'm going to take a breath and we're going to do what we need to do. And, one of I will never forget for me. And it wasn't that anything went wrong, but Z, we were at Kentucky, and Z was he was very difficult to get into the start books. And he used to wind himself up. And Philip had come up with this solution that he was going to warm up 40 minutes out in a show jump ring. We got, the stewards to agree to this. And then we were going to bring him back to the barn, and he was going to get on and head to the start box one horse prior to going out. And for me, that was a very stressful situation. And all I had to do was be patient. The horse is ready to go. Like this was just something. And the fact that Z was such a nervous horse, I had to find a way of just, staying calm, cool, even though I'm like looking at my watch going, oh my God. And we literally had people stationed along the way going, okay, such and such a number's out. Now you've got this many minutes. And think what Philip was right on the mark. It was probably the best Z ever went out at the right out of the cross country box. And, so you take that forward to, it removes the pressure then. I think that year we ended up going to the Olympics and we did the same process. So you sort of take that forward and go, okay, I can definitely breathe now. We know this is going to probably work. So, it's, I can...
Sometimes the waiting is the worst part. Sometimes the moment when you're waiting for the rider to come get on and you're like, come on, like let's go. Like sometimes that's the worst part when you're like, because once they're on, it's out of your hands. I've done everything.
Right.
And so that's where like that's sometimes the worst part where like I'm in my head of like, what did I forget? What did I but I listen to a lot of podcasts and books. so that I'm thinking about other things while I'm braiding or tacking up or whatever to keep myself
Oh, there you go.
distracted and not like spinning up in this little ball of energy of like, "Ooh," like no, I
Yeah,
try and
yeah,
distract my own brain from and think about
yeah.
something else, and go through the motions because, I have done it 1,000 times and it's, I hopefully am past that point, but I'm not always.
Yeah.
So,
I
depends on.
know, but I just had a memory back in 2010 at Kentucky. We had four horses because it was the year the volcano went off in
Uh,
Iceland, so we couldn't
oh,
fly. We had a badminton horse, but he couldn't go over. And they had changed. Everybody was changing the order they were going in because the British riders couldn't get there, so they hadn't ridden their horses as much, and da 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 da. And then the weather looked wet, so then the British riders wanted to go in their regular spot where they drew, and then Philip was like, "Well, I want to go where I don't." And he literally, it was like 10 minutes, and he's like, "Emma, can you get shit ready in 10 minutes?" I'm like, uh.
yep, yeah.
And the only reason it happened was, like, as we've said before, is preparation. Like
Hmm.
everything was ready to go.
Yep.
So I just called in another groom and said, please help.
Hmm.
And, it happened because I was ready to go. And had I not been prepared for that, obviously it would have been an absolute nightmare and probably not have happened.
Yeah.
So very stressful. I will say there was one time there was two of us trying to put studs in, which obviously wasn't going to help.
No.
Um, but once we
Yeah.
recognized that, we were good. But
Well,
I hate to say it, but it's just dealing with it and moving through it, right?
yeah.
You've
Well,
gotta,
yeah. I think on a
yeah.
not the same note, but earlier this year, I was in Le Bowl in France, and I think this was my third horse showing that day, and had been raining all day, so I'm wearing rain gear and like I was like, oh, and it was a good 10-minute walk in deep sand to get to the ring, this place. And I was like, oh, I'm like, I have the saddle on the horse. He's tied up in the stall. And I was like, oh, I'm just gonna go run and grab my rain pants just in case. And I was looking at my phone, looking at the weather, and walked into something like at a good click. Was walking very quick and ended up busting my head open. And I immediately was like, and I put my hand down and I was bleeding and I was like, like, oh my God, what do I do? And so like, luckily it was a Team America situation. And like, I know enough people that I can make if it wasn't, but like, luckily when it's Team America, there's enough people around. Like, so I like called someone and I was like, I'm not sure I can get this horse to the ring. The studs are in the bag. He just needs a bridle. He does not wear earplug. Like, this is what he needs. And like luckily there was a groom who was done showing and took him to the ring, and like I got some glue in my head and like I managed to get there in time to set jumps, but like it was still, if it wasn't for having the team around me that could back me up, like I would have been bleeding all over the place, probably bleeding because I'm trying to put studs in and my head's down, trying to do that. So like, but yeah, that was another situation of like preparation. Stupid stuff happens sometimes and you walk into things because you're looking at your phone and being an idiot, and like, you wish you could rewind 10 seconds and that didn't just happen, did it? But yeah, like it, luckily I had everything set up and the horse, went around and yeah, and I think he went well in the class. I think he placed or something, but like it was one of those things. Yeah, preparation pays off, and having your systems and having your tack laid out and everything ready, in case, because you never know what's going to happen. So
Yeah. And
stupid, stupid.
obviously we've got two like really seasoned career grooms here. So I would just add like having some self-compassion for you don't know what you don't know. I look back to some of the first times when I was vet teching and I got to groom for Philip some, and he was always like, slow down, like slow down. Like what do you slow down? And I'm like trying to get the cross country boots on, and like my hands are shaking because I'm like a little fangirl that's just trying to groom for Philip Dutton. Or I can think back to being at Red Hills with Jenny, one of my first like FEIs grooming for her, and she was like, I can't believe that Tyler sent me out with like a black bridle with a brown keeper on it, and my brain was like, I just like didn't even recognize it because I was in like mode. And of course now I'm like, yeah, that looks stupid, why did I do that? But when you're just trying to put a keeper on the bridle, you're not thinking about what color it is. And a lot of these things happen because we're moving so fast, and moving fast is because we're unsure or uncertain. So being able to slow down and be okay with making mistakes. I always use the trailer driving analogy too because I hate driving the trailer. Like it makes me so nervous that I have all these like creatures relying on my ability back there. I would have loved to take some sort of lesson or something to make it better, but the more that things happen, the more that you just go, "Oh, I'll be able to handle that," right? Like tire blew up, I'll be able to handle that. I had a tree fall down one time in like a neighborhood road where I couldn't turn around. And I'm like, all right, well, I guess I am getting out and like finding a way to move this tree. And the more that you do it, the more that you're gonna be okay with it, which is basically what you guys are saying. But in the process of getting to that point, you're going to have to go through a lot of making mistakes. So we do have another question here about some advice for moving past those mistakes. My sports psychology brain is all about the self-compassion, but I'd love to know any more practical advice from you guys, especially because some of the mistakes that we can make in this industry do have consequences, right? Like maybe our horse didn't get to run because of something that we did or something we forgot to do, forgot to fill out our FEI temperatures or, forgot that this horse needed X thing. And, there's so much that can go wrong. So, what is your advice for moving past mistakes?
I mean, I guess we're all
Um,
human.
no. You go, Mario. Margot.
Yeah. No, I mean, my thought is, yeah, we're all human. We make mistakes. It happens. And I think it does depend on your job and who you're working for as to how uh, easily they're going to take mistakes that you make, um, and what the repercussions would be. But I do think, we can. I know I'm hard on myself. Like I said, I was beating myself up for walking into something, but like. But yeah, you just kind of have to like take a deep breath and get it back together and move on because at the end of the day, and I kind of had this a couple years ago where I just a few things happened in my career in my life that just put things in perspective of like, as long as the horses are happy and healthy, you know how we get from point A to point B doesn't really matter. If I'm 5 minutes late to the ring, um it doesn't, in the grand scheme of things, hopefully it doesn't affect their warm up too much, but like it doesn't, as long as they're happy and healthy, and they're safe, I think that's the bottom line. So I think keeping that in perspective, like that, I'm not meaning that makes me sloppy about my job, obviously, but like it's just, remembering that, oh, I forgot to put the magnetic blanket on this morning and I meant to do that. And now she's riding and I've run out of time. Well, at the end of the day, like the horse is going to be okay. It's not, is that really the difference between them having a rail or not? Probably not. Like it's probably, makes me feel better. It's going through the motions, whatever, but I think there's, to some extent, you definitely have to be self-forgiving, that, you forget things, bad things will happen, stupid things will happen. You'll be late to the ring, whatever. But yeah, I think you just have to, you know, keep it in perspective and yeah, like remember to keep taking a deep breath and it'll be okay. Like it'll, just like take a minute. It'll be fine. It'll, again, it's not life or death. It's, we joke that it's livestock jumping sticks, in the grand scheme of things, like none of what we do, like we all are compassionate about it and we love it, but it's not, we're not doing brain surgery here. It's not, in the grand scheme of things, everything's going to be okay. So I think you just have to kind of keep that in perspective. As much as you take your job seriously, it's, it's going to be all right. So
I think I'm going to go off on a slight tangent here.
go for it.
Anyway, I will say, I'm not, again, not sure what the word is, but owning your mistakes, I think, is very important.
Yeah.
If you legitimately made a mistake, then you need to be the one to speak up. I think that does a lot for it, says a lot about you as a person, but it also gives you an opportunity to understand why it was a mistake and learn from that mistake. It like the example I had a working student. We used to feed lates. We would feed lates at night, and I had this one horse that was very, very, very picky eater. You could only feed him small amounts of grain during the day, and then he'd actually ended up with 5 meals a day. And he would eat the bulk of it. We used to split it up, but he'd like have two bowls, and by the lakes he'd have two bowls in his stall, and typically by the morning he would have eaten up. And the one morning I had earlies, I went down and he hadn't touched his grain in the morning. And it caused me to take a step back and go, okay, this isn't normal for this horse. What's going on? So then you go through your checklist, right? Well, he seems fine. He's not looking at his belly. He's, seems happy, nothing untoward. Take his temperature good, like that. And then I was like, well, why isn't he eating his grain? In my head I'm like, okay, what do I change to try and get him to eat his grain? And it turned out the late person had forgotten, slept, I don't know, the night before, and came out at 5:30 in the morning and fed late. And I had to hear that from somebody else. And to me that was, we say, and to your point, Margaret, at the end of the day everything's fine, but that could have been a disaster.
That's a horse safety and health.
Yes.
So I totally agree with you on that one.
Yeah.
Talking about,
so I think,
like,
if
there's a scuff on the saddle pad is Margot's point. The
little things. Where that's
that's what I do feel. Accountability. I hate. Absolutely. I sound really old saying this, but I think people lack accountability today. Yeah. They're not prepared to necessarily say, "Oh crap, I made that mistake."
I guess I didn't bring that up because I can't lie. So if I screw up, Laura knows. I will tell her, because I don't want her to find it out from somebody else, because that's my own anxiety of I screwed up. This is my position to bring that to her.
But I think that lessens your anxiety because you own up to it, right? Don't you feel like, to me, that's how I felt I coped, was like when I made plenty of mistakes, Philip went out cross country with no studs, and to be honest, it wasn't either my or the other groom's fault. We just thought the one and the other had done it. But I was the head groom, so when Philip came back and was like, I was slipping all over the place, I'm like, well, maybe that's because you didn't have any studs in, but I took the blame. Because as far as I'm concerned, I should have. That was on me, not knowing that horse had gone out. And but I feel very strongly like that, and I think you have to look at the mistake and go, okay, was that a really dumb thing? What do I learn from that mistake? And I won't happen again. And if it was something that it's another one. I gave a horse what I thought was Gastrogol, but it ended up being Equiox. He was meant to run an FEI. So I had two choices. I didn't own up to it. Philip got drug tested, and that would have ended a lot of careers. Or I own up to it, and the horse could get dropped down to horse trials, and he still competed. So you've gotta. We're all gonna make mistakes. The big ones, own up to it, learn from it, and go, you know what, I've got to move on. I won't do that again.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So
for sure.
I think. What about you, Tyler?
Yeah, no, I think everything that you guys are saying is really good. And we have another question here that's about dealing with criticism. And I think it works into this conversation because we're kind of talking about that internal, right? Okay, you make a mistake, have some self-compassion. I'm with Margot. My whole thing with eventing especially was we don't cry over colored rails. I'm like, when your horse can break down on cross country and not make it home, we do not cry over colored rails. It is just a colored rail falling out.
I know, that's my whole sport.
I would,
to be fair, I have significantly less anxiety putting horses into a show jumping ring than I did putting them out on cross country.
Right.
So, because people used to ask me a lot the difference, and I was like, well, I don't have to worry as much about there's actually only been one show in the last 6 years where I was there. The footing was so terrible that a horse blew a tendon on the first day. And that was the only time where I've been like, I don't feel good putting my horse in the ring today since I'd been an eventing groom. Yeah. So but I agree with you, but
Yeah,
I do change colors.
but again, like the scuff on the
Yeah.
saddle pad,
Yeah. Little things. Yeah.
um the keeper that's brown instead of black, like those are the little things that, like, again, you should say, okay, yes, that was a mistake. Horse care, there's going to be things like Emma said, of I gave
Yeah.
something that I genuinely thought was something else, or I was
Yeah.
talking to Margot and Emma beforehand about a situation where I was at a horse show, and by the time I was getting the horse ready for cross country, it was like 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and I should have picked the horse's feet in the morning, and I didn't. And I went to put studs in, and there's no nails on the inside. So I have to make a split decision of, do I say something, go to the farrier and get this fixed, knowing that I could get yelled at for not picking out the horse's feet in the morning, or do I send it? I was like, well, it would be way worse if this horse loses its shoe, twists, falls, slips, steps on a clip. Like, I'm just gonna go and take that. There is criticism in this sport, right? There's criticism anywhere, but there's criticism from riders, there's criticism from owners, there's criticism from other people and other team members. So how do you start to take that without letting it impact your confidence, or like deal with some of those feelings of never being good enough, right? Like, I'm trying,
Yeah.
but I just feel like there's so many mistakes to make. And I see that a lot with working students, right? Like, they come in and I want to be like little miss encouraging, and unfortunately there's just a lot of mistakes that they're going to make, and there has to be this like healthy balance of helping them get better and accepting where they are. But when you're the actual person that's getting that criticism from an outward source, how does that change the conversation that we're having about mistakes?
Emma,
I
you want
will
to start?
say, sorry, Margaret, but
No, go.
whilst I think about this, I will say, I think emo- people can say things in the heat of the moment, and being able to take that emotion away from the actual criticism, I think, is important. Um, because sometimes, I'd say a lot of the times, there is something to be said about the criticism, right? That maybe they didn't tell you in the right way or ask you in the right way. But if you can, and God forbid, I probably wasn't very good at it, if you can take a step back and go, well, they've had a stressful day. That was their criticism. I need to take that. Was there something I needed to change? And take that on and be like, okay, well, again, I'm learning. I'm always learning. But just putting it also back on the rider or trainer, everybody. For me, it was very important when I was managing that if I knew I had a criticism of someone, or even the mistake, someone had made a mistake, I for me, it was very important. I didn't like get everybody together and yell at that one person in front of all the other staff. I would try to take that person aside and be like, hey, this happened. What was your reasoning? Why did it happen? Do you understand why it was bad? The there's been a couple of incidents. There was a couple of incidents that shows, like, one day you'd be parked next to another rider, and the rider would like speak to their groom and criticize them, and like, so I felt offended for the groom myself because they were so rude. And I might not have said anything that day, which maybe I should have, maybe, right or wrong. But the next time I saw that rider by herself, I actually ended up saying something and was like, I would not work for you if you spoke to me like that. I'm like,
Mhm.
that did not need to happen that way. And she was very taken aback, actually. She was like, I didn't speak any. And I'm like, yes, you did.
Mhm. Yeah.
So, I ended up criticizing her, but it made her think too, right? Like, it made her reshape how she then spoke to her groom or working student, whoever it was.
Yeah. I think I think there's a differentiation between criticism and learning experience, and you're just learning. And so, like, I think calling it criticism puts a negative connotation on it. But I do think, especially when you're young in the industry, there's so much to learn. And I think a lot of people get their hackles up of like, oh, I'm screwing up, when it's, other people are just trying to teach you or help you. And yeah, it does have to do with how you say things, as to if you, hey, do you mind trying to do it this way? in or shaming you and making you feel bad for doing it not the way you would do it or the wrong way or whatever. Um, and even then, I still have conversations with my coworker, and we worked together 4 years. Well, but why do you do it that way? And I'm not trying to be like, I do it this way, and like instead it's just like, well, why do you do it that way? And we don't always agree, and we don't, I'm sure when I'm not at the show, he does things one way, and I do things his way sometimes just to, you know, because again, the horses are happy and healthy, and if we do things his way, they're going to be just fine too. And I don't have to agree, but anyway, but going back to criticism, I think a lot of people, especially when you're young, you're trying to establish yourself that you know something, and but you have to be very open to learning. And so and so you just have to, I think you need to be always keep an open mind when people are being critical, as to taking it as a learning experience and not jumping to defend yourself immediately, but sometimes like, oh, I've never thought of it that way, or that is a good way. But obviously, sometimes when it's older grooms, they've done it 1,000 times and they tried it your way and it didn't work, and so maybe they're just trying to help guide you along the way. So I think you have to be willing to learn for sure. But I've definitely had bosses and people that were critical, in a negative way. And so sometimes, my best way of dealing with things is I talk about them. So I'll go find somebody that I trust and be like, ooh, like, why did they make me feel like crap today about this? And I know, in hindsight, it was the Nations Cup didn't go well or whatever, and you keep it in perspective of like, by tomorrow, my rider's going to forget about this, that they ever make me feel bad today. And took it out on me. And I know that's the reality. It doesn't feel very good right now, but like, I'm going to go vent about this to somebody, and then I need to suck it up, and I still need to go get ready to go to the ring. So it's, you figure out, your own way of dealing with criticism in the moment. And yeah, last time I had a bad day, where Laura was really critical of me, and I know why, and I know it wasn't me. It was the day was not going well, and she was taking it out on me, and I did have that perspective, but it still didn't feel very good. But yeah, I found somebody that I could go talk to about it for a few minutes and get it off my chest, and then I was like, okay, now I'm going to get on with the rest of my day, and maybe I'm not going to I'm going to avoid Laura a little bit and like put some space between me and her so that I don't get shouted out about something else. But it's luckily those days are few and far between, but they do happen. And you just kind of have to figure out how, the best way for you to cope with something and not always internalize it and make it something that, haunts you. You have to, take the criticism, change how you do things, especially if it's your boss, and just, and like one of the things was like, I didn't have a belly band for spur marks. And I was like, you haven't chumped in one in 6 years and I didn't pack it this week and that's your problem. Okay. So like, yeah, it happens, but you bet I now have a belly band everywhere I go because I'm never getting shouted at about that again. So, you live and you learn, I guess.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Bringing up, I was in the Nations Cup. It's like, where's the nose net? And I'm like, you mean the nose net that you told me that you never wanted to see again? That one? That nose net?
That,
Right? Like,
yep.
and
Yeah.
it's funny, but like, you have to realize, I think there is a lot of like really type A people in grooming because you have to be so on it, and like your brain keeps track of all this web of information and it feels so obvious to you, right? Like it feels like I remember the moment where you said this thing and they probably don't,
Yeah.
right? And
No.
that's just like okay, take a deep breath and don't let yourself get carried away in a thought because overthinking things is not going to change it, right? Like there's no way to go back in the past and pack the nose net for Europe, right? So you have to take a deep breath and say, what can we do about this now? And when I'm talking to clients about dealing with a lot of internal criticism, I love using the phrase be curious, not judgmental, because there is always something to
Ed
be,
Lasso.
how could I do that differently, right? Like how could I change this? How could I deal? I think it's so powerful because if you can flip it, then you don't have to stay in the criticism. And even if criticism's coming from someone else and it feels really aggressive, or it feels like, oh, I'm taking this really personally right now, what could change? What could we do differently? How could we get this better next time? Do I need to have a conversation with this person about how they're talking to me? Do I need to just find some skills and strategies to let things go and let things roll off a little bit easier?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it ties in with you guys, like, it's not letting it define you is the way I see it. Sort of like, again, it ties into learning from the criticism, and just not let that one thing define who you are because you made that mistake and someone feels you need to do it differently, right?
Yeah.
I think it's very easy to go down that path of, like, Tyler said, like overthinking it and just staying in that zone, which doesn't help anybody, and it doesn't certainly help yourself. So definitely learn from it, flip it, and you'll be fine.
Yeah. Yeah. I think just, I agree. Changing your perspective and just, okay, you just have to move on from things, and overthinking doesn't help. Same with, yeah, making mistakes and criticism. It's all, you know,
Linked
just
together.
take it, put it on the checklist. Next time, won't do that. And, yeah, I mean, but wallowing in it, or, getting yourself all in a grumpy mood about it, I used definitely like have taken that, and then like even when I'm done something stupid and I'm beating myself up, the next person asks me how I'm doing, I'm like, yeah, I'm good. Because sometimes forcing yourself to smile will help you, get yourself out of that. And so it's just, remembering to, keep going, stay positive. You know, it's a hard industry, and we work a lot of hours, and you just got to keep going. So
Awesome. Awesome. Well, I feel like these are like two of the harder questions. So, I would love to hear. I have an easy one to like tagline at the end of this so that we can bring it all back. So, I think I've got a pretty good plan
Where are you going, Tyler?
for
all
this
right,
half
bring
hour.
it on.
Um, okay, so how would you handle a situation where you feel like your horse is being asked to do something that is unfair? It's maybe asked to compete at a level you feel is inappropriate, soundness is questionable, there's maybe a horsemanship disagreement between what you think you would do and what the rider or the owner wants to do. Just smile and do
And
it anyways. That's what I'm getting from Emma right now. She's like, just smile and wave, boys. Smile and wave.
yeah,
I feel uh again, it comes back to communication.
yeah,
And if the easy one is, if, say, you're grooming a horse and the horse looks like it might have done a tendon or something, and you're going to go to the rider and be like, hey, I was just doing this and this is what it feels like. Maybe that rider is like, oh, it doesn't, it's fine, it's fine. And I think letting them stew over that, and it's in their brain, and then coming back, maybe after that one ride, just you'll be like, hey, just double checking, are you okay with this, like, and it's sort of pointing it out a couple of times if something isn't quite the way you see it. But it needs to come from a place of, like, I have noticed this, if that makes sense. Like, not, we can't do this because this is what I find. Like, that is, as a groom, that actually isn't your job. Like, your job is to say, this is what I see, this is, how do you feel about this, and have that discussion. And to be honest, if something is super unfair, there are times you're going to have to walk away, and you're going to have to regroup and make a decision how you want to deal with that. And I think in this day and age, there's obviously various lanes we can go down, should we say, to make people more aware of the bad stuff. But you have to live with whatever your decision is when you see something like that happen, bad happen, and just maybe the time is to walk away and just rethink where you're going and if it's the right place for you to be.
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
I totally agree with all of that. But yeah, and definitely anytime I notice anything, even the tiniest thing, or even, a scratch or what, I'm gonna communicate those, especially if it happens at the show, and I am gonna communicate that. But there is a point where it's not my decision making, as to if the horse goes, and sometimes you can bring it up, but sometimes the rider they have to come to the decision themselves. And like you said, bringing it up a few different times, like, or communicating, this looks a little worse today, what do you want me to do, or this is how I'm trying to support this problem. And just doing what you can to help the horse as best as you can, but at the end of the day, it's not my decision, if the horse runs or not. It's them. And so yeah, you have to decide what, you know how much you can live with, yeah, of them making that decision, or if this is the line in the sand for you of, well, this isn't where I want to be. And on that note, there's an you could go down the other lane of, there is so much horse abuse in this industry. And different, riders will ask you to do things, and that's not to say I've necessarily been in those places, but what people do to horses, and you decide what is your comfort level of this is something I'm not comfortable doing, or being a part of with a horse, to get it to, the you know the examples of people that have gotten banned from the sport, or what, or even the, Charlotte Dujardin last summer. And, like, there's things like, you have to decide what is your ethical level of, horsemanship as well. And I think that that is realistic in this sport, that you have to decide what, this is something I'm going to stand by and, you know, let happen or participate in, or actually, like, I'm not, this isn't the job for me. This is not it. And I think that's a realistic conversation to have, but that's a fair, you need to know what you can live with. So yeah, I think that is part of our industry, and you just have to know what your, what the right job for you is, um, down the road. So
Yeah, and I would just add to what is your level of control in the situation, right? Like Emma said, it's not necessarily a groom's job to say this horse can't compete. That's the vet's job, right? And if the vet and, most of those situations, the vet and the rider are talking to each other and knowing the chances and knowing the risks. There are other situations that come to mind that I felt like I maybe had more control over. So maybe, obviously the horse not being asked to do something that's unfair, but we were going to Florida one year and there was only a certain number of stalls. And when I was told how many horses were going, I was really worried about the storms. I'm like, we just have too many nice horses to not have enough stalls per horse. Like, I don't feel comfortable as your groom going into that situation. We either need a shed row or we need to talk about like thinning out the herd. And we actually did leave two horses in Pennsylvania that year, or situations where we were getting done at a show super late and a lot of trainers say, well, let's just get home. I would say, I'm really tired from working over the last X amount of days, like, I think it's safer for everyone if we just go the next day. And that was always respected. Hey, we have 7 horses going to the show. Can you do it by yourself? Yeah, I can, but none of them are going to get hand grazed. And that's not fair to the horses. Can we ask such and such person to come help me hand graze the horses? And so, like, those pieces of it does affect, maybe it's not an exact situation of like, hey, they're lame and they have to compete, but there are other situations that you have a lot more control over, that it's not fair to you or the horses to have to drive tired or have to be overworked or overstretched at something that is very important. So when it is like a level of control thing, knowing that you're in a situation where those conversations will be respected, and I feel really lucky that my advice on those things would always come, because it was not just about me. It was truly about the horses. Like, I know that my capacity to take care of these horses is going to be affected at X amount of horses per person.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. What about it when there's pressure to keep both the horse and the rider happy, but their needs are conflicting, right? So like you're in the situation and rider wants one thing, horse wants the other. Conflict is arising, kind of similar to what we talked about, but less like directly related to lameness, and just trying to fill all sorts of demands of the job, because I do feel like we are, asked to make sure we've got all the, well, I guess depending on the job, but sometimes, you have to pack for the rider, make sure you've got the right show coat, make sure you've got the right helmet, and like do all these things, and also try to take care of the horses. So just managing both of those roles, and managing the relationship with your rider as well.
Um, I probably have a very different take than Mark.
Let's hear it.
I
You start.
and this honestly, like I say, I was in the job for 16 years and I sort of had the philosophy of I take care of the horses, you take care of yourself as the rider. Like, um, I sort of felt very strongly about that, and but on the competition side of that, especially at the internationals, the Olympics and stuff like that, I felt it was my job to, if there were nerves and he said run around in 3 circles and jump up and down and jump this, you would do it, just if that was what was going to make him happy and perform better at the event. Like, I would never, especially those high profile events, and maybe that's wrong for me to do it, but for me that was important. Like, whatever, you've done what you can for the horse, and whatever it took for him to be in the right mind to compete, then if I had to say yes sir, no sir, then for me that was the thing to do, because then the end goal is that you perform the best you can, right? So for me that's how I dealt with it, but maybe that was the wrong way to do it. Margot, how about you?
Uh, yeah, no, no, there's definitely a dynamic. I do. I don't have to, cater to Laura that much. She's a horse person at the end of the day. I do make sure the helmets, boots, jackets, I don't pick them out, but I remind her they need to get packed. And these things need to come on, on the trip. But yeah, so like there's definitely multi facets to the job. It is not just, horse management. There's, and sometimes I'm doing the entries, or sometimes you wear a lot of hats in this job. Um, so but yeah, I think it's figuring out figuring out the balance. I don't think, luckily working for someone like Laura, who is a horse person, like she, wants what's best for the horses always. They're definitely like when I was at Spruce Meadows a few weeks ago, which you guys wouldn't understand, but it is a good 15-minute hike to the ring there. It is far. And even like the shortcut back is still a 10-minute walk. It is not like, even if you're not walking a horse, it is far. And so trying to compete 3 horses in one day, sometimes 2 in the same class, and having to run back and forth. And then at the end of the day, looking around, and I have a mountain of tack. All the horses need to be bandaged. The ones that showed early in the morning need to go for a walk. I'm like looking around and I am feeling very overwhelmed. And Laura's, gone off to go to dinner. And, there's moments where I'd love to be like, can you help me? And like, sometimes she will, sometimes she'll, come and help clean tack, when she knows it's been a busy day. But that was definitely one of those moments where I was like, I'm glad you're having a good day, miss, and like, I'm just still like have 3 more hours of work to do. And I'm going to put in my book and I'm going to go to work. And like, it was, those are the days where like, if I hadn't, if she would come help clean tack, I could get them out for like another 5-10 minutes of grass, where like that, and that's something that I think keeps the horse happier. So, but at the same time, I'm not going to work till 8 o'clock at night. some days. So sometimes they're going to get 5 minutes less of grass, and that's unfortunately today. And I'm going to try a little harder tomorrow when I have less going on to make sure you get more grass. And so it's finding the, going back to boundaries of what however much you can do to keep your horses happy. But keeping it realistic of to what your job description is of like, I'm not gonna, work myself to the bone to keep to make sure that because I'm setting the standard for myself. It's not like Laura's timing me and making sure they all get out first. She respects me and trusts that I'm going to do what's best for the horses. But sometimes it's frustrating when I want something more for them and I can't do it. I can't keep working to 14 hours into the day. I just, there's a line you have to draw for yourself. And so that goes back to self-care and looking after yourself. So, which is also part of the job. So don't work yourself to death.
But I also, just tying in with you there, Mark, I think, or a little bit, like Tyler was saying, type A, we're all type A people, though I don't consider myself type A. But anyway, in these situations, remaining flexible, I think, is so important. Like, even though we were talking about earlier, as grooms, we tend to know exactly what the horses want. Like I've had a couple of horses that just couldn't deal with a ton of people around. And as you can appreciate, Margot, like those big competitions, everybody wants to be there. Like the owners want in, the ride, the wives, the children, like everybody wants to be there. And I had to have the confidence to speak up and say, okay, this isn't right for the horse. Can everybody please leave?
Yeah.
And I would have to trust that, Philip would hear that and to be like, okay, bye-bye.
Yeah.
I can remember at Red Hills one year, I had 4 horses. I was by myself, FEI, 4 horses, and they had to jog on the Sunday, and the Saturday night had been a long time. They all had to jog. I did have a lot to do, and Philip, there was a lot of people around, and Philip, he came and was like, hey, do you want me to hang raise them? And I actually turned around and I said, you know what I would really like? Can you please take everybody away?
Yep. Yeah.
Because I was fed up of running around people they were trying to be helpful, but they weren't being helpful.
No.
I think, again, that conversation of like, what do you need out of me to help you, and vice versa,
Yeah.
And staying flexible. Like there's going to be, there was plenty of times where you've made a plan with the rider in the morning, and then all of a sudden, like they'd give you a phone call and be like, we're changing it. This is what's going to happen. And
yeah,
you have to be able to go with the flow that way. You can't just be like, well, no, we had this plan this morning and this is what we're going to do,
Yeah.
So
yeah,
that's all important. Does that answer that question, Tyler?
I think so. Yeah, no, I think you did a really good job, and like Margot kind of highlighting, like Laura's going out to dinner. She's probably going out to dinner with her owners, right? That's probably something that she so that's a need of a rider and the needs of the horse. Okay, yeah, I have to balance these things, and I think that is one thing, like coming from a sports psychology perspective, I did always wear as a sense of pride is I'm trying to take as much stress away from my rider as possible. Like I am involved in setting them up for success. Like they can't have their calm, quiet pre-performance routine, like, whatever they like to do, whether it's listen to music or go through their course or get that extra walk in, like that's me being part of the sport. And so while yes, okay, that might sometimes conflict with, again, I'm not being able to do absolutely everything that I need to do on this list of things that need to be done, prioritizing so that you do find those moments where these are the most important things that need to happen for the horse right here and right now. And then, later I can ask this person to help, or I can shuffle things, or guess what, we're coming back to the barn with dirty boots from cross country, and we'll scrub them on Tuesday. It's like not the end of the world.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, why don't we wrap up with everyone's top grooming tip for turning horses nicely out at shows, or tips, because I feel like that's hard to like boil it down to. I mean, I know what I always say for this, so if you want me to go first, I can.
You
on.
go for it.
I always say that my top tip for turning a horse out at shows is making sure that you've done the work at home. Because if you don't do the work at home, your horse is not going to look good at a show. So it's like daily care, nutrition, management, and to me, it was always easy to turn on the horse out. Yeah, like baby powder on socks. Like, let's make sure we have hoof polish. I love like putting baby oil on their nose. Like, that was probably my favorite thing. I'm just like getting their little soft nose with the baby oil and like watching it shine. But none of those things matter if you haven't put in the right nutrition, fitness. It's just like yourself, right? If you don't eat good, you're not gonna look good.
Yeah.
I that was on my list for
Now,
top tip.
you wrote that down too.
God dog it.
But just adding on to that, doing the for me, like do small tidying up every day as opposed to waiting until the day before the show and stressing you out. Like, the pulling of manes or I'm trying to think, just tidying up, if you're trimming ears, stuff like that. Like, don't leave any of that till last minute. If you do a little bit every day, then again, like Tyler says, turning out the horse the next day is very easy because you've already prepped for the main parts. So, but my one favorite, absolutely, I think everyone should have. Well, there's two. Okay, witch hazel. Anyone that knows me knows I always bring up witch hazel. So always have that in my bag. It is in my to go show ring bag as well, because you can just spray it on a towel and like pick up the dust before they go in the ring. But it's not as drying on their coats as some of the products out there. And then learn how to hot towel your horses. Even in the winter when you maybe can't wash them as much as you want, hot toweling with a bit of oil in can really bring up their coats and make them look super shiny. So those are my two things. I always use the Shapley's #1 oil in with really hot water, and I feel like hot toweling is a very old-fashioned thing that I used to do when I was 13. You don't see much of it now, but maybe we can bring it back into fashion.
To say we
Yeah.
had actually, I remember on the last webinar, we had a question specifically about hot toweling, so I'm glad you brought it up. Is there a frequency for your hot towel? Is it like, can you hot towel too much? What's your, like, tell us some of your hot towel hot tips.
I don't think you can hot towel too much. Like for me, it was really useful in the winter. Again, like when the horses like you don't want to wash them because it's so cold, but they come in a little sweaty. Like it was super easy to get the sweat off and leaving their coats. They don't get too. They're not getting cold because you're not soaking them to the skin with it. So, but no, I don't think you can hot towel too much after clipping. Again, maybe you're clipping in the winter and you can't give them a bathe, like hot toweling to pick up the loose hairs and some of the clipper oil, and that I think is super beneficial. But then it would probably be one of the last things I do with a horse before I go down send them to the jog strip. I would hot towel them and then just brush their coats over and maybe use a fleece mitt, and to me they were looking good.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, agreed with all of the do your homework at home. I've met grooms that bathe their horses every day. I've met people that don't bathe and they just groom, like just curry a lot. I personally don't love metal curries. Other people I don't like the noise, it really bothers me. But like some people love them and think that really brings out their coats. I think you just find out what works for you. But I am with you on the hot toweling, but I my old school eventing trick was apple cider vinegar washes. Like especially if you're not going to give them a soapy bath, but they've gotten in a lather, a couple glugs of apple cider vinegar and some water and sponge that on and then sweat scrape it off. Works for me, but I have a spray bottle with witch hazel and apple cider vinegar in it that I'll spray on their coats, especially after they've had a bath, while they're still wet, and spray that on. And then afterwards, I'll take a soft brush when they've dried and really brush them. And that kind of gets because, witch hazel and apple cider vinegar are both astringents in their apple cider vinegar helps balance the pH in their skin. So it's really good for skin issues and especially or dry skin and then and so I'll even in the winter or I go south for the winter, so I don't really have to deal with too cold of weather, but I'll mix especially if I have like it's the end of the day and I have a bunch of horses that need to get groomed, I'll make a bucket of warm water with apple cider vinegar and some coconut oil and use that as kind of my hot toweling. And just, I'll go over them with that all over. And then I'll, because most of ours stay pretty clipped. Most of the time we don't really have, a lot of long coats. We don't really give them a big time off, where they get that kind of, that time to grow a big coat. But so yeah, I'll go over them with that and then take the time to paint the hoof oil on their feet. And especially I always put the hoof grease on the soles of their feet because that's where they're growing. They're healthy, the base of their sole. And so I'll oil their feet. And then by then, usually they've dried and I'll flick off, go over them with a soft brush. And yeah, and that really keeps their coats looking really nice in between baths and in between, I don't like bathing every day. I wash legs after they've jumped usually because I'm going to be putting bandages on. I don't want to keep the footing in their legs, but when I'm at the shows, but otherwise I don't like to bathe every time they've jumped, even if they get sweaty. So that kind of will help. The apple cider vinegar and the coconut oil will help kind of keep their coats healthy in between baths. And then I don't have any gray horses right now, but I do find that keeping their tail clean as much as you can, not every day because you'll dry it out, but trying to wash it a few days out before the show with the purple shampoo and keeping it clean will help. And my favorite product is the Cardan Martin mane and tail show sheen. I think it does a great job of detangling and it doesn't dry out their hair and make it brittle like some of the show sheens do. So I like that for tails. So that's kind of my few tips and tricks, I guess.
I love it. My spray, I mix together everything. Like witch hazel, apple cider vinegar, healthy hair, baby oil. Like you got it. I'm putting it in my bottle and spraying it on it's just a mix.
Yeah.
Emma's cracking up right now. But
I'll do
I
that
can
with
teach you that one, Margot.
I do that with my hot toweling sometimes. I'm like, you need a little bit of this today and add some oil or
Well,
whatever.
and then I always felt like we always had like so many different like types of shampoo. You get the samples, right? So I'm like I would just mix it together. I'm like, who knows which one of these shampoos the best? We're just gonna have a little cocktail of
Yeah.
shampoo, and why not add some baby oil in this bath water as well? So I'm a
Yeah.
bit grooming cocktail gal,
No.
but really,
More is better.
more is better. But healthy hair, witch hazel, apple cider vinegar, and baby oil together makes a fantastic spray. Emma,
Okay.
baby world class grooming over there does not approve,
That's
but
not in the book.
it's not in the book.
Okay, I'm open to learning. I'm open to
not this-
learning, Tyler.
Emma told me that my horse was looking really good the other day, so
Oh,
it's got to
very
be
cool.
something.
Aw.
All right. Any closing comments, thoughts, wrap up,
No,
sayonara?
I think we covered
I
everything.
just think to everybody, and I think I probably finished the last one like this. Remember, just enjoy the horses. As Margot mentioned earlier, at the end of the day, we're not curing hunger. We're not
No.
surgical break.
Yeah.
I mean, we are in a luxury sport. And I just think as long as you do your best and put your horse forward, put your horse first, and remember you are an advocate for the horse, you're going to go a long way. So
Yeah. No, I agree with all that. It's definitely, what we do is important to us, but it's in the grand scheme of things, it's not, we're not performing brain surgery, but I think you should take pride in what you do, for sure. And always, I think it's always worth putting your best foot forward and always, sorry, my dog is eating his food in the background. I think putting a smile on your face goes far and being nice to people. and being approachable. I think there's always something to learn from other people, and I think we are a community, and so keeping that in mind, I definitely, I remember one day ages ago where I was just rushing and I was trying to do my morning chores at the show, and everybody's hand walking and everybody was stopping to say hi to me, and I was like, I have so much to do, and then I like had to take a deep breath and be like, I'm so glad I have friends, and I'm so glad there are good people in this industry that want to talk to me. I need to stop, I need to get out of my head. So I think remembering that this is a community, and always, trying to put on a good face and be nice to people, and that goes really far in this industry, and not being afraid to ask other people for help. Because it's always, there's plenty of us that want to help each other in this sport. So yeah.
Absolutely.
Let's finish up with my 2-second plug of I do offer discounted rates for working students and grooms. So if you need some mental support for dealing with the pressures, dealing with any situations in the industry, you'll be talking to someone that sort of understands what's going on. And I love to, whether it's your own competition horses or the pressure in the job, I really truly think grooming is a performance in and of itself. So I try to offer really, really reasonable rates to get you guys in, and I've had riders pay for their working students before, which is really cool. I think that's something that should be more normalized of, hey, like, let me give you some tools for handling pressure and actually help you support. So if you've got riders, grooms, all of those things, please feel free to reach out.
Awesome.
Cool. Well, thank you very much. And I hope everybody has taken something away from this.
All right. Have a good night, everyone.
Yeah.
Have a good night. Bye.
You.